My name is Sky Nicholson, and I am a mother. And this poem that I'd like to share with you today, I wrote during one of those nights when an unknown banshee wakes you. It's called Hallways Are Darkest at 3 a.m. Outside, an animal is dying, so I check the beds for breathing children. Stop at the stairs, wall to wall in a freeze frame, and I am fast forwarded to 44, creaky as a floorboard, and wondering who thought to put me in charge here. A static shiver blooms inside me like a bloodworm, microscopic and uncatchable. Outside, a banshee is moaning, and I am shrouded in slow-mo, playing house. Today's topic is a hard one. Ooh, three words in, and I'm already choking up. It's a difficult subject to sit in with open ears and open hearts. And yet, when I sat down to write, I found the words poured out in torrents. This topic is always within me, right under the surface. Most days, I try not to know that it's there, shimmering behind my reflection, a specter aching to wail. It was the second to last day of school this past May. And I woke up with an uneasy feeling. The aftershock from the Covenant school shooting in Nashville was still shuddering through the news and social media. And it was reminding us daily that no school is exempt from this nightmare, no matter how small, how private, how seemingly protected. I couldn't quite put a finger on why I felt so unsettled that morning. Perhaps it was from a disquieting dream. Perhaps it was scrolling through too much Facebook before bed. But as I walked through the quiet house to rouse my two children for their final days of first and third grade before summer break, I felt the slow itch of anxiety digging a pit in my stomach. Anxiety is like a snowball, a gravel-filled, yellow-crusted, sharp-edged snowball. It starts with a little clump of worry inside my brain, which ignites more thoughts. What if? Scenarios and justifications start to build around that initial thought. And before I know it, I am in full spiral. Heart racing, brow sweating, stomach doing somersaults. What if my uneasy feeling is a sign? What if I have some kind of mother's instinct that something bad is going to happen today? I mean, really, anything could happen at any time. We just never know. All those moms at those other schools may have had an inkling too, the morning before it happened, and they brushed it off as being paranoid. But what if they had listened to their gut and kept their kids home from school? Should I keep my kids home today? But it's the second to last day of school before summer break. They have all their parties. They get to meet their teacher for next year. I'm probably just overreacting to a bad dream. But what if? And so it goes on like this inside my mind as I tremble outside their bedroom doors, listening to their soft breathing. They are so innocent. They have none of this anxiety, this burden of adulthood, of parenthood, of being privy to every horrifying news event from every corner of the globe, every reason to fear stepping out of the house on any given day. I want them to wake up every day and see the sun and grow up and follow their dreams and maybe even someday have kids of their own to worry about. I want to block out all fear and pain and horror. Shield them from the darkness of the world, keep all evil miles from their doorstep, cast protective spells around every car, every building, every sidewalk they travel down. Keep them locked in a bubble of my love and hold them close enough to my breast for my whole life so that they will never know hurt or sadness or death. But no, that is not possible. That's not even my job description. My job is to open my arms and watch them walk out into the world. There is so much I cannot control. And that tears my heart in two. I take my kids to school that day. They are so excited. Nixie gets to bring her favorite stuffed animal for her class party, and Zach is ready to kick butt in the dodgeball tournament. At home, I sat and meditated for a long time. I breathed and I called my wild mind back to center. In stillness, I found comfort, at least for the moment.
We have two readings, both in two voices. The first is a poem, Silenced, a poem for the victims of the 1999 Columbine school shooting by Marjorie Skelly. 1. Untold Lives. Silence sits on empty chairs in living rooms, under the covers of the always made bed, in the arms of Kellyanne Fleming, buried holding 2 teddy bears. Years later, she might have sung a lullaby to her baby. The quiet of the Blue Devils of the Colorado Rush soccer team at Stephen Robert Curno's funeral, Stephen, the youngest victim at 14. Silence after Kathy Renee Bernal's last word, yes, when asked by the gunman if she believed in God. In the absence of Corey Tyler DePuter's smile, in the dead entering the living at his funeral, silence on the sidewalk where Daniel Lee Rohrbaugh lay for nearly 2 days before paramedics were allowed to move him. In Rachel Joy Scott's car turned into a memorial in the school's parking lot, in the grass where she ate lunch with Richard Castaldo, in the library where Matthew Joseph Kechter studied with his friend Isaiah Scholl, an ordinary day of quiet ending in noise. Silence after the last words that Isaiah heard from his killer, spewing racial hatred. He might have played football, become a music executive, a comedian. Silence in the voice of National Honor Society student Laura Dawn Townsend, giving the valedictorian speech. In the shelves that Kyle Albert Velasquez put up with his father, the lawn he mowed, the car he washed. Silence in the flag flown at half-mast in his honor at the state capitol. The silence of Daniel Connor Mauser, sophomore with a straight A average, concerned about gun safety in America. The silence of unbuilt houses for Mexico's poor that John Roberts Tomlin would have built. Silence after his comforting a student hiding with him under a table. Silence in the science lab where computer business teacher William Sanders bled to death after waiting for 911 for 3 hours after he saved untold lives.
2. Epilogue. Lock the libraries, science labs, cafeterias, patrol the parking lot and sidewalks. On April 20th, raise the flag high over vacant landscapes. Let it blow inside unbuilt houses and the dreams the automatics have pounded into silence, deafening, eternal, uncompromised silence. Still, hear the shouts and pleas of the dead as they continue to shake the living, the hollowed out living, the living not living, but sleeping in the large cemeteries of apathy. Do something. Do something. Do something, anything to kill your nothing, your noting, your nodding off. Take up arms against complacency. If your ears are pounding, they should be. If your eyes are opening, do not avert your gaze.
3. Eulogies. For the dead. Let me go back from the traveled road, away from the crowds pushing, to a quieter hill where the woods are still, serene, neath a clean blue sky. For the living. Let me go forward on the traveled road, to feel stone and dirt beneath my feet, to honor the dreams of the dead, whispers from angels, neath a clean blue sky. Our second reading is a poem, The Banshee by John Todhunter, published in 1888. Green in the wizard arms of the foam-bearded Atlantic, an isle of old enchantment, a melancholy isle, enchanted and dreaming lies, and there by Shannon's flowing in the moonlight, specter thin, the specter Erin sits.
An aged desolation, she sits by old Shannon's flowing, a mother of many children, of children exiled and dead, in her home with bent head, homeless, clasping her knees as she sits, keening.
And at her keen, the fairy grass trembles on dun and barrow. Around the foot of her ancient crosses, the grave grass shakes and the nettle sings and swings. It in haunted glens, the meadow sweet flings to the night wind her mystic, mournful perfume. The sad spearmint of holy wells breathes melancholy balm. Sometimes she lifts her head. With blue eyes tearless, she gazes athwart the reek of night, upon things long past, upon things to come.
And sometimes, when the moon brings tempest upon the deep, the roused Atlantic thunders from his caverns in the west. The wolfhound at her feet springs up with a mighty bay, and chords of mystery sound from the wild harp at her side, strung from the hearts of poets And she flies on the wings of tempest, with gray hair streaming, a meteor of evil omen, the specter of hope forlorn, keening, keening.
Wail no more, lonely one, mother of exiles, wail no more. Banshees of the world, no more. The sorrows are the world's, thou art no more alone. Thy wrongs, the world's. Will you breathe with me? Take a deep breath in and out. Again, in and out. And once more, slowly in and gently out. And just continue to breathe at your own pace. If you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes or place both your feet firmly on the ground. If it feels right to you, you can sit up a little straighter in your chair and let your shoulders begin to soften and relax. In this moment of breathing and settling, we may feel a bit breathless and unsettled. Take inventory of your breath and body, your mind and heart. Continue to breathe slowly in and out, in and out. Notice where in your body you might be feeling some tension or stress or pain in this moment. Focus your breathing toward that spot in your body, breathing in and out, in and out, in and out. And as you feel ready, I invite you to return your awareness to this sanctuary, to this community that surrounds you in love, here and now. I wanted to begin with breathing and meditation because the themes of this service and the readings that Sky and I just shared, along with Sky's reflection, are both breathtaking and heartbreaking. Realities of gun violence, of losing family members, especially children, to violent crime, whether at school or a mall or in a time of war, are very difficult topics to look directly at for any significant amount of time. The pain, the violence, and the wailing of the world is too much to bear at times, and the human beings that we are, to maintain our sanity or to not feel crushed by the grief of the world, we try to find ways to shield our eyes and protect our hearts from this. When Sky and I were planning for this service, she mentioned that this is a really difficult subject matter for us to address with care and compassion. She was right. Hence, we began with breathing and silence and meditation, along with beautiful music and rituals throughout this service. And what I said in response to Sky is that not only does this Sunday service need to be prepared and delivered with care, which every service does, but that it is especially difficult since these are topics we don't often cover in such a direct way. In other words, they are difficult themes in and of themselves, but they are also difficult because they are unfamiliar in this space, this sanctuary, and in this hour we gather week after week. But whether we acknowledge the wailing of the world in here or not, the wailing nevertheless exists out there. And we are confronted with that truth every day in small and large ways, with stories that are close and some that are far from home. We can try to avoid the news, and some are really good at that. Some stay off social media, but the wailing persists. The violence continues, and we will only be as equipped as we choose to prepare to be for engaging, let alone bringing healing to these realities. Like preparing for the zombie apocalypse or climate catastrophe, our survival is not assured. We must prepare and be ready to respond together. And so when developing this 6-part series on monsters, it was important to dig deep, to be vulnerable, to not just skate upon the surface, but to dive deep into the depths of the soul, to explore the underbelly of our society and the myriad manifestations of evil that are revealed to us in this life. The first 4 weeks of this series covered what we might consider the all-star monsters, or the all-stars, if you will, the familiar ones, the cool kids, the jocks, maybe. I'm talking about the go-tos, the tried and trues. For Halloween outfits and scary stories with flashlights alit for full effect, zombies, check. Vampires, you betcha. Frankenstein, well, of course. And finally, ghosts. Who needs those bed sheets anyway? But this week and next week, I want to end our series with some less common monsters we face. And for the purposes of today, we are, of course, coming face to face with the Banshee. Have you heard of the Banshee before, or maybe literally have heard one before? The Banshee comes from Irish folklore, and the name is derived from 2 parts, Bian, which means woman, and she, which means fairy. So Bianshi, or a Banshee, is literally a fairy woman, or sometimes depicted as a female spirit. But that's just the beginning of it. The Banshee's purpose and function in a family or community is to herald the coming of death. How does she warn of the impending death of a loved one? By screaming or keening. Keening is a type of lament for the dead found in Gaelic Celtic tradition, and it was a very familiar practice for many centuries, but has now nearly completely disappeared today. In our second reading, we have some description of the keening Banshee from playwright and poet John Todhunter, who writes, "An aged desolation, she sits by old Shannon's flowing, a mother of many children, exiled and dead in her home with bent head, homeless, clasping her knees, she sits, keening. And then later he goes on to say, sometimes she lifts her head with blue eyes tearless and gazes athwart the reek of night upon things long past, upon things to come." One of the original reasons I chose the Banshee for our series on facing our monsters was the visual imagery of the crying, weeping, wailing woman. And the image that emerged for me is the all too common occurrence of the grieving mother seen across time, space, and culture, seared upon our hearts. In just the past few months, we have seen picture after picture, headline after headline of women grieving the death of their children and of family members killed by violence and hate. From Ukraine to Israel, from Palestine to Lewiston, from Uvalde to Columbine, the examples are endless. And it raises the perennial question, why is this still happening? And that might sound naive, but it is also a very serious question. How, as a society, have we not ceased the violence, ended the semi-automatic gun proliferation, and addressed the hate at its root? It is not for me to list all the reasons we are in a perpetual cycle of seeing, weeping, sleeping, and awakening, seeing, sleeping, or weeping, sleeping, and awakening, but perhaps some understanding can come from the banshees that surround us in society and this morning. I titled this sermon, The Banshees of Columbine, which is a reference to the 1999 mass shooting at Columbine High School, excuse me. Once an ordinary suburb of Denver, Colorado, Columbine became an instant household name throughout the United States and beyond. Columbine really changed everything. It was the first mass shooting that was televised in real time. Those who watched with horror from home were as aware of the progress that was underway for law enforcement trying to end the violence that was going on the screen. The violence of Columbine, the memory of Columbine produced a community of banshees, of grieving parents wailing at the world upon things just past and upon things we couldn't even imagine were still to come. As we approach the 25th anniversary of Columbine this April, I'm wondering about the banshees of Columbine. Has their wailing stopped? Has their grief subsided? Have they gone on with their lives? I would expect that the banshee never truly stops their keening, even if it lessens to a dull, eerie hum. No, like grief, the wailing changes over time, but never fully leaves us, just as our loved ones never fully do. And additionally, just as a slow setting wound can be reopened by the smallest of bumps, the banshees of Columbine are remembered on the campus of Virginia Tech, the parking lot of Sandy Hook, the hallways of Uvalde. So too are they opened on the streets of Kyiv, the kibbutzim of Israel, and the hospitals of Gaza. The banshees of Columbine are invoked as guardians of the wailing, guardians that are wailing for new generations and by new generations, just as they received their wailing from banshees long before. With all that is unfolding globally, nationally, and locally, you might be feeling a little conflicted of the timeliness of this service and its placement on the Sunday in which we will shortly be holding our annual congregational meeting, our 56th annual meeting, to be specific. Why such a grief-stricken topic on the day we are doing the governing business of the congregation? Well, here's the thing. The annual meeting each year can be viewed in two ways. And for some, it's likely a little of both. The first is that this day is a perennial administrative task towards the perpetuation of an autonomous congregation, uplifting the process of our values of democratic and congregational polity. It's something we do. We need a new budget. We need to elect new board members. We need to dot the I's and cross the T's. With this view of the annual meeting, this definitely might feel like a disproportionately heavy topic to engage in a service immediately preceding it. Yet I believe there is another way to view the annual meeting, whether it be our first, 56th, or 100th, and this is it. The annual meeting is our annual collective statement as a congregation that we are still here, that our values have not wavered, our steadfast concern for one another and the world remains intact. And yes, we have more work to do. The annual meeting in this sense is suggesting that we refuse to shut out the wailing of the world. We refuse to banish the banshees of Columbine or any other corner of our community, society, or world. We refuse to say, it's been a good ride. Now what? Brunch? The annual meeting then is a resistance to the hubris that we too often can take this congregation, this community, or any other for granted, or that we can take anyone, including our loved ones, for granted. Rather, this is our statement to the Banshees of yesteryear, the souls of the living today, and the promise of the rising future, that ours is a religious tradition, a progressive community of loved ones not to be taken for granted, but one that is ours to grant, that is ours, to which we commit, covenant, and make ever more real. The annual meeting is a marking of time, an acknowledgement of loss and grief, a celebration of victory and jubilance, and a courageous, loving exclamation that we have more work to do. The work of ending violence against children, of ceasing war and eliminating poverty, of caring for the earth, and of granting all the freedoms of self-determination. This is our continued work that our ancestors, our congregational founders, and we collectively call ourselves now to do. As Sky read powerfully earlier in the service, at UUCCI, we are called to do something, anything to kill your nothing, your noting, your nodding off. Take up arms against complacency. If your ears are pounding, they should be. If your eyes are opening, do not avert your gaze. Friends, our eyes are wide open. Our hearts are beating, our lungs are breathing, and our community rising to meet the day, to meet the need, to say yes to the promise and the hope of this world. May it be so, and amen.